All right. I think we are live. I'm just keeping an eye on the chat to confirm that you can see me, hear me clearly, and that there are no streaming issues. So once I see a couple of messages pop up on the chat that all is okay, we will get started with today's live Q&A. Yeah? There's usually a few seconds delay, so I'm waiting. As soon as you guys message something on the chat, I'll know and we can go ahead. All right, I've received the all clear. Let's go sign. So let's get started. I hope everybody is doing fine. I hope you are caught up just the right amount in the World Cup frenzy. Not too much that everything else takes a back seat, but also enough that you have fun, especially with India winning most of its matches. So I'm very happy to be here. If we have not met, I'm Swetha. I have a 780 in the GMAT. I'm a graduate from USC Marshall School of Business. I did my MBA there with a 100% tuition fee waiver. At Wizako, I handle a lot of your verbal classes and data insights classes. So any questions you have about the Focus Edition, about preparing for the GMAT, about the MBA application process, feel free to post the questions on the chat. I have a computer right here in front of me. I can see the chat alone on it. So I will be answering your questions as they pop up. Right? While I wait for the questions to come in, we did have a couple of questions that we received beforehand from our posts about this live session on different social media platforms and from our students. So I want to address a couple of those questions first. Absolutely good evening, everybody. So I want to address a few of those questions first, and I also wanted to just talk about the Focus Edition, the Classic Edition, and starting your preparation now in November. In case you have been living under a rock and you have not been hearing the numerous updates that everybody, including Wizako, has been posting, the Focus Edition is going live later this month. In just a couple of more days, from the 7th of November, you will be able to take your Focus Edition test. So if you have started preparing for the Focus Edition, then you will be able to write the test in just a few days. I know some of our students have started registering for the Focus Edition for testing on like November 11th and 13th and so on. So that's nice that people are going for the Focus Edition as soon as it is launched, right? And the Classic Edition is still available. There is going to be an overlap period, so until Jan 31 you will be able to write the Classic Edition of the GMAT as well. Right. So the first question that I want to talk about is, can I start my preparation in November and still catch my application deadlines? Because that's a big question for people who maybe hesitated about, whether to do the MBA this year, who had work commitments that stopped them from preparing full-fledged with their GMAT, and so things just got put on the back burner, right? Procrastination is the easiest thing for a lot of us, isn't it, right? So if you start now in November, it's going to be a tough ask, honestly speaking. But is it a doable task? It still is, right? If you have done whether a little preparation, some preparation, it's going to be easier, of course, to scale up from that. But even if you're starting from scratch, then you have about, I would say, approximately 60 days by which you should try and write the GMAT, and that is still a doable thing, right? Start by taking a diagnostic this week if you have not done so already. If you are undecided between the Classic Edition and the Focus Edition, then take a diagnostic for each of the two editions and see which one is easier for you to scale up, right? There is a lot of theoretical learning in the Classic Edition with the geometry concepts and sentence correction concepts and essay writing funda that you will have to learn. All of that has been removed, but you have integrated reasoning as a key part of your test in the Focus Edition, which means you need to scale up the amount of practice that you do, your ability to leverage what you learn in quant and apply it in data insights. All of that you have to scale up, right? So there is practice involved with regard to the Focus Edition. There is more theoretical learning with regard to the Classic Edition. So find out what your cup of tea is. Now, once you have that in place and you understand which edition of the test you're going to go for, by this weekend, then start your preparation immediately. You do not have a day to waste, right? Get started with the basics. Work on your concepts for a good few weeks. Make sure that your foundation is very strong. Just because you have a short duration till your date doesn't mean that you jump straight into mock taking and practice test taking. Unless your basics are in place, it's going to be hard for you to scale up eventually, right? So start taking your mocks after about 5 weeks or 6 weeks of preparation, and then after 5 weeks of getting your basics in place, doing chapter by chapter preparation, doing basic level practice questions, you can start with the mock taking, and you can shoot to write the December and shoot for December last week as around the time when you will be writing your GMAT. All right, does that mean you will be able to catch application deadlines? For the most part, a lot of the business schools have Jan 1st deadlines, but you have even later than the Jan 1st week deadlines. Many of them have Jan 1, Jan 5 deadlines, but you have a bunch of schools, and this is just a snapshot. Schools such as Cornell and MIT that have later deadlines, Jan 10th, Jan 15th, which gives you a little bit of a breather, a little bit of a window in which to pause after you write the GMAT, after your marathon preparation, and then you can work on your application. Application preparation takes a lot of effort, so you will not be able to take a really long breather, but you can pause for a quick day and then start working on your application. Right? ISB has mentioned, it's not on their website, but a couple of my students, Wizako students, reached out to ISB and asked, hey, you guys, do you have around 3? And in response to their emails, this is not just one person. Consistently, ISB has been telling people we will likely have a Jan end round 3 deadline. Round 2 deadlines for ISB are in December. Round 3 deadlines are likely to be in end of January. Right? So ISB is still a catch, still something that you can aim for if you are just in the early stages of your preparation. What it requires from you is a lot of diligence and a lot of consistency in your preparation. The more organized your day is, the more structured your preparation is, the better you will be able to scale it all up in 60 days, right? So this is again Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I've just given us one example of an Asian school. A bunch of Asian schools will have Feb-March deadlines, and then you still have round 2 deadlines for a lot of US schools and European schools in mid-Jan and late February. So those are all schools that you can definitely apply to as well, even if you are just starting off with your preparation. Yes? Alright, hope that was helpful. You can start posting your questions on the chat, you guys. I have questions on the slide behind me, and I'll interchange. I'll do some questions from the slide, but then if I have questions on the chat, I'll definitely prioritize your questions and I will answer them. Yeah. All right. Okay, the question I have on the chat, is the Focus Edition more difficult than the Classic Edition? Why is a good score only 665? All right. So if you were not sure what this is, right? First off, couple of things about the Focus Edition scores. Classic Edition scores are on a scale of 200 to 800, and your score will always end in a 0. The Focus Edition scores are from 205 to 805, so the scores will always end in a 5. Why is that? Just for visual differentiation by the business schools. As soon as someone looks at a score, they need to be able to figure out, is this the classic score or is this the focus score? For that purpose, the score, they have consciously made it end in a 0 or end in a 5. How does that matter? When the business schools look at your scorecard and they see a 665, they will immediately know 665, 675, 695. These are all Focus Edition scores and they're not Classic Edition scores. So they will take that into account when they are evaluating you. So is the Focus Edition tougher? Is that why you are asked to aim for a 720 and a 740 in the Classic Edition? And then official sources tell you that the 740 or a 720 equivalent is a 675 or a 695 in the Focus Edition. It's not that it's tougher per se. There are a couple of factors that have gone into this. One is the fact that you now have 3 scores contributing to your 800 score and not just your quant and verbal scores. So data insights, or the refurbished integrated reasoning section, is no longer a bonus section but is part of the main score. So when you have the third element come in, obviously score ranges and the scoring algorithm is going to change. So this is just a reflection of the scoring algorithm changing. The second factor you need to take into consideration, the score concordance table that the GMAT has created. If you have not heard of that, please go ahead, check out mba.com, which is the official GMAT website. And when you search for score concordance table, it's available as a PDF. There's also a web page, so you can read it online as well. This essentially compares classic edition and focus edition scores. Now, focus edition, people are writing it only from November 7th. So no one has actually written the focus edition even as of today. So where did the score concordance table come from? The GMAT used tons of data points. They looked at all of the last 5 years, and over the last 5 years, what they did is they hypothesized this person wrote the classic edition. But if I remove geometry, if I give remove sentence correction, if I give integrated reasoning and important weightage, the same person, for the same answers that they have marked on the test, what are they likely to score in the focus edition? So that's how the score concordance table has been created. It has over 8 lakh data points, so it's highly representative, very likely valid, right? And that's why we are able to say that a 720 equals a 675. So don't worry about it. That's perfectly fine. It's not that it's not a question of difficulty. It's just a question of changing what contributes to the score. That's it, right? The other factor is people who wrote the classic edition can attest to this. They took integrated reasoning a lot less seriously than they do. They would be taking integrated reasoning now if they were preparing for the focus edition. Because there is an added level of fear, isn't there, when it's something that matters towards your score. You don't want to mess it up. Whereas when it was just a bonus score, we were perfectly fine to say, yeah, it's okay. I'll just do more practice on quant and verbal. That's what matters, right? So yes, now that people are taking integrated reasoning a little seriously, a notch, the scores are likely to come up. That's my personal prediction, right? So that's the disclaimer. I don't know if it will come up. Based on just our experiences with students, in about a year, the percentile rankings might a notch, notch change. We'll keep an eye on that. We'll keep you guys posted. It's not that the focus edition is more difficult. It is just that the components of the test are different. That's the biggest takeaway I want you to have from this question. Yeah? Okay. The next question we have sort of touched on this for the earlier one. Will schools know how to compare the classic and focus edition scores? Right? Yes. That's the short answer. Right? Absolutely. The schools will know how to compare the classic and focus edition scores. Don't worry about it, right? There are questions here that people ask. What if my classic edition is considered no longer valid when I apply like 1 year or 2 years from now, right? Any score, whichever edition of the test you end up writing, is going to be valid for a good solid 5 years, right? So even if you are writing the classic edition of the GMAT, let's say on Jan 15th of 2024, it is going to be a valid score till Jan 15th of 2029. Please don't worry about it. Your classic edition scores are going to be valid, which means unless the GMAT had a methodology to ensure that the scores are comparable for 5 more years, they wouldn't have instituted these changes at all, right? So what has the GMAT done in order to make sure that your scores are comparable? I can think of about 3 things, 3 key factors that have gone into ensuring your schools consider your focus edition scores. Number 1 is the visual aspect, right? If the focus edition score had also ended in a 0, then that perception and that familiarity bias will be there, right? I'm so used to seeing 710 and 720 that now suddenly if a score report has 670, I would have started to wonder whether that person met the expectations, right, as a business school adcom. But by making it a 675 and a 665, the score report is forcing sort of the adcoms to stop and think, right? Wait, that's not what I'm used to. So I can't apply my familiarity, instinct, bias into judging the score. So let me think about it. Is 665 a good score, right? So that ensures that the business school outcomes are being fair in your treatment of the two scores. There were a bunch of people who raised the question about this bias, about this tendency that we have to say a 700 plus is a good score. So had students come to me and ask me, Swetha, they're saying this, they're saying that there will be this bias. So what if they misunderstand my score report, right? There have been a lot of efforts that have been taken to counter that. People understand that these biases exist. Business school outcomes are attesting to the fact that they are going to be cautious about reading your score report. So please don't worry about that factor. The second thing that GMAT has done to ensure that your score reports are being treated fairly is the training that they are giving to business schools. And this training element has two aspects to it, right? One, a bunch of the top business schools are on the board for GMAT, right? So when GMAT made the decision and said, hey, we're going to go with the focus edition, we're going to bring these changes, we're going to make data insights a new factor in your GMAT score, they didn't pick that up out of their pocket and then make that decision, right? They did that because business schools asked them to do it. In fact, business schools have been asking them to do it for a really long time now. That's why they introduced the integrated reasoning in the first place way back in 2012. But GMAT didn't want to mess with the scoring algorithm at that point in time. So despite school feedback, they kept it as a bonus score. Now the schools went back to the GMAT and they said, hey, we want IR to be really important, not just a bonus score. And so they checked and they verified and they tested the algorithm enough times based on the school's inputs and feedback. And that's when they decided to make integrated reasoning a key part of your test. So the schools knew this was coming long before you and I did, which means the schools were on board with it. Without the buy-in of the schools, the GMAT would have never made the decision. So now that the GMAT has made changes as per the school's request, do you think the schools are going to go back on their word and say, you know what, we are not going to have the focus edition as a key part of our application anymore? No, that's not going to happen. We had stories come in earlier this year about some schools not accepting the GMAT, but that was only because the GMAT Focus Edition, but only for the earlier deadlines, specifically because they didn't have a timeline as to when the Focus Edition will be announced, and so they didn't want to move around and play with their application cycles. That's it. Now, the most famous of these stories was, Harvard and ISB. ISB has stated that they will be accepting the Focus Edition this year, and even Harvard has said from deadlines that are after March, they are accepting the Focus Edition. Harvard is a key board member on the GMAT. They're not going to suddenly retract and say no more Focus Edition. So don't worry. The schools been have been given their buy-in, and the GMAT regularly conducts training sessions for all the business schools to ensure they understand how to read the new analytics, the new score report. So the adcoms are on board. Absolutely do not worry about it. You guys are fine, irrespective of whether you're preparing for the classic edition or the focus edition. If you're planning on writing the classic edition, don't worry, your scores will still be valid till 2029 or whenever it is 5 years from the time you write the test, right? Schools will not suddenly start to give less priority to your scores. If you are preparing for the focus edition, you're right there, equal priority. The schools wanted this. That's why the GMAT is doing this. So they're not going to disregard the focus edition scores. They know how to read the score reports, so they're not going to misunderstand the score report and think that a 665 or a 675 is a bad score. So keep all of those worries aside. What you need to do is just focus on your preparation. Just focus on getting a good score in, and then everything else will fall into place. How others respond to the score is not really a factor that you should be worrying about. Okay? I have a bunch of highs and good evenings in the chat. Hi Shamkumar, hi Abhi, hi Dev, hi Shubham. Nice to all of you for joining us here. Shamkumar, you've been preparing for the current edition for a long time. Okay, how long is a long time? Do you have any questions? Do you want any help? Please let us know in the chat, and I will absolutely address those questions that you have. Yeah, all right. Okay, so while we wait for the question, I have one more that I received earlier on from a student. So maybe this is a relatable question, Sham Kumar, or maybe this is a question that you sent, right? I have been preparing for the classic GMAT. I'm not scoring high in the mocks. Should I change to Focus Edition? Okay. So if you have been preparing with the classic edition and you're finding it a little difficult and you're thinking, wait, what's happening? This is not where I want to be in my preparation. It can be sort of an instinct to immediately say, you know what, I'm gonna chuck this. I'm gonna stop here and then I'm gonna switch to the Focus Edition. Or, I'm gonna apply into schools that still have GMAT waivers, even if they're not the top ranked schools or something like that, right? So it can be quite a bit of an instinct to sort of give up or postpone the whole process, right? And switch to something else. But before you do it, now your switch can be valid, can be a legitimate thing to do for your success. The switch can actually end up being detrimental as well, right? So what are the differences that we know in terms of the syllabus between the classic edition and the focus edition? The classic edition of the test has geometry, has sentence correction, has essay writing, and has only two factors that are contributing to your overall score. That's your quant and your verbal breakup. Finally, the classic edition is longer, right? These are the 5 factors. So conversely, you don't have geometry, don't have sentence correction, don't have essay writing. You do have a third important factor, and your test is shorter. So if you are stuck with the classic edition and you're having trouble with the preparation, right, ask yourself what your strengths and weaknesses are. Do a mock analysis and also go to do a focus edition mock. You can take one of the free full-length practice tests that are available on the mba.com official practice test website. If you want to save it for later, because if you make the switch, then you need those free practice tests after you prepare some, then go to wizako.in/diagnostic. I'll have the team post that link on the chat. You have a full-length focus edition diagnostic test, right? It's not adaptive, but it is full-length. It is 45 minutes for each section with 20, 21, and 23 questions, just as you find it in the test. So if you're checking what your skill sets are, then what you can quickly do is take a mock, right? Take a diagnostic for the focus edition, take a mock for the classic edition, and then you can compare the results. What was my hit rate in sentence correction questions? What was my hit rate in RC and CR questions? If sentence correction ended up helping you manage your average time and answer more questions in the verbal section, if a sentence correction ended up being a strength, given that you've already invested some prep in it, maybe you should stick with the classic edition. Similarly, check for geometry, right? Check for IR. So these are your 3 areas in terms of content. Finally, also check for how you did in the second and third of the sections that you ended up attempting. Why am I specifically asking you to look at the second and the third sections? The classic edition is longer. You need to be able to focus for over 3 hours compared to a need to focus for just around 2 hours. So because you need to focus longer, you might find that stretching for 3 hours is actually a difficulty. Especially if you've been working for a while, we all know how difficult we find to go back to an academic environment. So the test was made shorter for your advantage. So focusing for 3 hours is not easy, then maybe you should switch to the focus edition, right? But don't take the call just like that, right? What you need to do is take a mock that you have already taken for the classic edition and then compare it with the focus mock, right? And then see how well you're able to play to your strengths. Then you can design, am I sticking with the classic edition or am I sticking with the focus edition? I have a question in the chat. For a person employed in data science team who wants to start GMAT prep, which one would you recommend? Ooh, that sounds like you have a little bit of data literacy skills already. And interpreting and processing the kind of information that is given in a graph or a table might not necessarily be a bit of a challenge for you. So you might come into your preparation with some skills already, right? If that is the case, then you may want to play to your strengths and ensure that you are giving that preparation that is needed for IR to get to your data insights section up, right? The data insights section, honestly speaking, is going to be the section that people are going to invest a lot of time and effort in terms of the preparation, right? Compared to people who are preparing for the classic edition. And I'll tell you why, right? It's hard to do data insights preparation without doing at least a significant portion of your quant and verbal preparation. Your inferencing skills that you build in reading comprehension, your ability to process an argument in critical reasoning, your statistics, averages, mean, median concepts, if not other quantitative concepts, are all tested in different ways in the data insights section. Which means when you're building your knowledge base, you focus on building your subject matter knowledge in quant and verbal, and then you think about applying that and reconfiguring it in order to fit the data insights section, right? Having some data literacy, ability to understand data presented in different forms, is also a skill that you need to develop along with your ability to apply quant and verbal concepts in the data insights test format. So if you already have one of the two going in as you start your preparation, then perhaps you might be better off, right? Getting started with the Focus Edition preparation, because you will be able to apply your background and your prior knowledge and experience in order to scale up your score significantly, right? The question format in the data insight section also requires some getting used to, because with quant and verbal you have multiple choice questions, 5 options, 1 correct answer, whereas here there are multiple parts to a question and the number of options can differ, right? So you need to be able to practice a lot of data insights questions, you guys, in order to be able to get it in place. Have a question in the chat. Is the math part taught in the coaching sufficient, or do we need to practice from other sources too? Practice is one thing, what is taught is another, so I'm going to address that as two different things, right? In terms of the concepts you learn in class, you don't need anything else, right? Whether that's from the pro course that you're referring to or the live online classes, what you learn in the class, what you learn in Wizako's courses in terms of the concepts covers all your bases. You do not need to learn anything else in terms of concepts. You also have sufficient practice questions for math, split into 3 different categories at the very least. Actually, more than that. You have essential practice for people who are just getting started, who are getting back in touch with quant after a long while. You have basic level tests, you have advanced level tests, you have prep questions and section tests and so on, right? So you have a bunch of things for practice that you have for quant. So you don't need to practice. That's a lot. That's more than 1,000 questions, right? So it's a significant amount of material that you have to practice. At the same time, I would recommend that you solve a few questions from the official guide as well, right? Just the last portion of the official guide questions at least, where the questions in the official guides are usually arranged according to difficulty. So you start with sort of easy to medium level questions, and then you scale up to medium high level questions. So at least the medium high level questions in each of the sections, do it from the official guide, even if you have essential practice done otherwise. And the reason I'm recommending that, all of the official guide questions are retired GMAT questions. Questions that people have actually attempted as part of their testing, except it has now been removed from the database. So obviously, I would strongly recommend that you practice the official guide and re-practice your mock questions. When you take a mock, and I'm again talking about official mocks from mba.com, when you take a mock, step 1, you take it as a test. Step 2, you analyze it for your test performance, right? What questions did I get correctly? What questions did I get incorrectly, right? So you look at why did I make the mistakes I made, you analyze, you put things into your error log, and you see, okay, what do I need to go back and learn? What concept have I not understood? Or what concept have I not gotten enough practice on that it's messing up my performance? So you go back, you check, and then you ensure that you're able to answer the questions better, right? And finally, if you have the time, you can also take the questions that you answered incorrectly and solve for them without actually taking it as a test, just solving for them, right? Okay. I can no longer see your chat because the screen auto locked. I've not been touching it for a while. Give me a second while I open it. All right, there we go. Okay. How will IIM's ISB differentiate students who took classic versus focus? For each admission rounds, does the number of students accepted decrease? Now, those are two interesting questions, right? Sort of talked about how different schools are receiving the training to differentiate between the classic and the focus edition. Touched on that already, right? The fact that the score now ends with a 5 with the focus edition is one tool. And I know for a fact that the IMs are among the schools that attended, the different sessions conducted by the GMAT to get all their questions clarified, to ensure that they had a very high level understanding, very good in-depth understanding actually of how the focus edition analytics that are presented to them is different from the analytics presented for the classic edition test. So they are trained, they know what they are doing, they will be able to very effectively differentiate whether you got the classic edition or the focus edition score to them. Also, they are familiar with the concept of the score concordance table that is on mba.com. So they really do understand how to compare the two schools based on the percentile ranking. The IIMs, as we all know, are no newbie to percentile rankings. They have been using percentile rankings for their entire history for the CAT exam and the full-time MBA program. So don't worry about it. If any school is equipped to make sure they look at the percentile rankings and not the actual score, those are the IIMs, right? So don't worry about it too much. The second part of your question, for each admission round, does the number of students accepted decrease? It's the number of seats that decreases, right? So there are two factors that you need to consider here, right? There are schools look at the candidate's profile individually. They look at the candidate's profile in relation to the cohort of people who have submitted their applications. This is true for any school, not just for IIMs and ISB, right? So what they do is, on your own individual merit, do you have what it takes to succeed in the school? Do you have what the schools are looking for, right? We just posted a video, today's Friday, right? So we posted a video yesterday called Throwback Thursday on this Wizako GMAT channel, which was my conversation with the Assistant Dean of Admissions, the Head of Admissions at USC Marshall. And the snippet that you see in the Throwback Thursday video is about the three broad set of factors that schools look at when trying to decide a candidate on their own individual merit. So I strongly encourage you to check that video out. That's representative for not just USC Marshall, it's representative for the majority of the business schools out there. That's why we put that video up in the first place, right? So they evaluate you on your individual merit. They also look at how you can contribute to the cohort and how you stand out from other people who have applied, and whether someone has a stronger or a weaker application than you have. And then they decide whether to give out an offer of admission irrespective of how many seats they have. If they think you are a deserving candidate, whether there are 20 seats or 100 seats in the program left, they will still give you an offer of admission, right? Now that they have made an offer of admission, there is another factor that comes into the picture, and that is the acceptance by the students, right? A lot of times, the number of an offer would have been made by, let's take the IIM example, both Ahmedabad and Bangalore would have given an offer of admission to a student. The student is not going to go and study in both places, so he's going to end up saying yes to one and no to the other, right? So now if say the student says yes to Ahmedabad and no to Bangalore, there's just one more seat that opened up in Bangalore, right? So the schools know that. They know they're not going to have 100% acceptance. It's a fact. Most schools, even the most competitive ones, have acceptance ratios ranging from 40 to 80%. Literally, no school has 100% acceptance rate. Not even the Harvards and Stanfords of the world. And they keep all of that in calculation while they are making offers of admission, which means the number of students accepted changes from round to round. The number of total seats available changes from round to round, but it's also a factor of how strong an application you have, which is why we say don't apply just because a deadline is around the corner. Apply when your application is at its best. If it means investing another few weeks in your GMAT preparation, if it means taking a couple of more weeks to make sure you're polishing up your resume and your application essays, the way an MBA application resume and an MBA application essay is supposed to look, and not just essay writing based on when you last wrote essays while you were in college, right? When you shape up your application, the total seats and all of that stop having an impact on your ability to get an admission, even your ability to get a scholarship from any of the programs. The stronger your application, which means the more polished everything is, the better your chances of admission, irrespective of which round you're applying in. Thank you, Vikram. How can we improve the score on data insights section? What are the tips from your side for your scaled score of 80 in DI? Oh, Sai, how long do you have? I can chat about tips for DI for like another 3 hours and I would still not be done. Right? Okay, so here are a couple of things that you can do to understand data insights and do better in it, right? Make sure you have a very clear, differentiated understanding of the 4 question types that have come in from IR. Right? So I'm going to do an IR discussion and a data sufficiency DS discussion. Right? So 4 question types that have come in from IR. Make sure you understand the differences between them. The differences are in how to mark your answers. The differences are in what sort of concepts are tested in terms of quant and verbal concepts. And the differences are in how much information you're provided beforehand. Finally, amount of information you're provided beforehand is one factor. Amount of information you have to process beforehand is another factor, right? One graph has fill in the blank questions. Tables have classification questions. Two-part analysis has another sub-parts division questions. So the question types in each of these 4 categories is different. If the question type is different, then your strategy, your approach to it is different, correct? You can't have the same approach for all 4 question types, which is one of the most common mistakes people make in data insights, right? So what they end up doing is, whether it's a graph, whether it's a multi-source reasoning, whether it's a table, they split the time the same way. I'm going to spend X amount of time on processing the information and Y amount of time on answering the question, which is not what you should be doing, right? Amount of information you're presented is one thing, how much you process beforehand and how much you process based on the question is another thing, and that varies from question type to question type. So what quant and verbal concepts do I need to strengthen? What are the differences across the question types? And how do I split my time between the question and the processing of the information accordingly? These are the 3 things you have to ask yourself and answer correctly for you to answer your integrated reasoning questions effectively, right? Now, the other part of the question, which is data sufficiency. Data sufficiency just requires a strong conceptual basis for your quant section, right? When your conceptual understanding of quant is a little weak, you may still be able to get away with it for some quant questions, right? You may not necessarily know what concept it is or what the formula is, but if you have a sense of numbers, you may be able to substitute answer options and solve for it and still arrive at the correct answer. But if you don't understand how the different concepts are connected to each other and how they interact with each other and why this particular formula, why this concept, if you don't get the why, it's going to be harder for you to score in data sufficiency. data sufficiency will also end up taking a lot more time, right? So work on strengthening your fundamentals. Number properties and algebra concepts are especially tested in data sufficiency. So make sure you have a really strong grounding in those concepts before you do data sufficiency. So just these, the three aspects that I mentioned for IA and what I mentioned for data sufficiency, working on your quant concepts is a good place to start to improve your data insights. Okay, so a couple of things. It is the last question. If you're not applying this year, you can write the Focus Edition. It probably works for you. So yeah, I don't have any other questions on this slide. Questions that I see on the chat. If during quant prep you're not able to solve a question, should we see the solution and understand the concept? I absolutely, for everything, right? One of the mistakes that people make is they focus too much on the volume of preparation rather than on the quality of preparation, right? Or the duration of the preparation is what they focus on rather than the quality. What do I mean by that, right? I have 3 months. Within 3 months, whatever I do, I'll write the GMAT. I'm going to spend 5 hours a day or 3 hours a day or 30 minutes a day on your GMAT preparation, and then that's it, right? So you're measuring your GMAT preparation by quantity and volume, right? All this at 1000 questions practice, 500 questions practice. Again, you're measuring your preparation only based on quantity and volume. If you have to measure your preparation by the quality of your preparation, then you have to think about what am I learning from each question. The more meaningful your learning process is from each question, then even if you do 300 questions, you're going to find that those 300 questions took you a longer way than doing another 600 questions would have taken you. One of the important factors that impact the quality of your preparation is having that error log. If you have an error log and you track what's happening, what you got correct, whether you got it correct for the right reasons, if you got it right for wrong reasons, which happens, trust me, for a lot of people in verbal, and they don't realize it, right? They would have actually misinterpreted the passage, would have got the answer because they misinterpreted the option as well, and they thought some two unrelated things were connected. It would have worked out by fluke. They'll give themselves a pat on the back for getting a high accuracy in the passage, but then the next time a similar question comes up, they may not get the answer right. So even if you got the answer right, did you get it right for the correct reasons? And if you got it wrong, then absolutely, what happened? What is the actual solution? What did I do? Compare each step of the process and analyze where you went wrong, and then capture that in your notes. Do it for all three of the sections, quant, verbal, and data insights, not just for quant. If you do that, then it means if you set aside 1 hour for your GMAT preparation, you're actually solving questions for only 30 minutes. The remaining 30 minutes are spent on analysis, but those 30 minutes will take you a longer way than just brute force practice for an entire hour, right? So yes, absolutely analyze, go back and watch the solutions and learn from the concept, learn the strategy, learn the shortcuts, learn how to answer from the answer options. Every last bit of learning you can mine from the question, please do so. I'm going to take 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up. Can I apply in my 5th semester? I assume you're applying for your deferred MBA programs. Can you let me know how many semesters you have in total? Is it 6 or is it 8? I'll take the last question in the meantime. If you're writing the GMAT on December 27th, which round would you be able to apply with? You will be able to apply for round 2 for a lot of schools. So schools like ISB, which have round 2 in on 3rd of December, then you will be able to catch round 3. What I would recommend that you do, if you are writing your GMAT in the tail end of December, I would recommend that you sorry, I lost my train of thought because I was looking at this chat. Sorry, if you are writing your GMAT in the tail end of December and you are trying to catch deadlines in early January, start thinking about your application process right away. Even as you prepare for the GMAT, even now, keep thinking about the application process and what you can do to improve your application. If it means researching a school, attending a school's webinar, connecting with a couple of people and networking with them online, if it means, just thinking about what you want to say in the application essays, getting your transcripts in place, some aspects of your application if you work on now, then even if you write the GMAT by the end of December, within about 10 days, you will be able to start applying to the business schools. You will be able to, put it all together, really focus on your application essays and work on it, right? You have a follow-up comment that you want to apply only to Ivy League universities. Now, if you're applying to Ivy League universities, then I would recommend that, um, if possible, right, as much as possible, try not to rush the process. Again, it circles back to what I mentioned earlier, and the importance of having a stronger application rather than a just-in-time application. Right? Ivy League schools don't just look at your data points. They look at a bunch of other factors in order to determine whether you make sense to look at a school, right? And those factors are conveyed through a well-perfected resume. Those factors are conveyed um, through your application essays, through the letters of recommendation. And all of these are time consuming processes. You have to iterate each element of the application at least a couple of times to make sure it shapes up the way you want it to impress an Ivy League school, right? So if you're targeting any of the M7, then do one of couple of things. You need to either start working on your application elements right away along with your GMAT preparation, or you need to be thinking about a later deadline if writing in December end is what's feasible for you, right? You've mentioned that you're connected with me in the MBA tour. Happy to connect. If you haven't connected with me on LinkedIn, I invite all of you, whoever wants to send me a DM, to send me a follow request and connect with me on LinkedIn. And then if you want to talk one-on-one about your application process, at least chat, I am happy to take that offline, right? Shubham has a couple of questions about the courses. Okay, so a bunch of messages. Let me read them all together. Are there any courses for Focus Edition? I've taken your online Focus Edition package. Focus exam date, no marks yet, need some planning advice. Okay, all right. So, oh, that's from Vikram. I'm reading two people's questions at the same time. I'm so sorry. All right. Shubham, yes, there are Focus Edition courses. You can see them running behind me. We have live online classes for the Focus Edition where we will be connecting with you through Zoom sessions, and you can ask your questions and clear your doubts right then and there. We have three of us. You have met me, you have met Bhaskar on YouTube, met us, and then there's one more faculty member on the team. So the three of us will be doing all your classes, and then you will also have access to all of the online recorded lessons as well for a year. You'll be invited to doubt clearance sessions of focusing on quant and verbal. You will have support on a Telegram group. All of that happens. And then you also have a self-paced online course, right? So you can do one of two, three things if you are interested in the courses. You can, all our short URLs are Wizako, wzko.in, right? So go to wizako.in/gmat or /pro and you will be able to see our online recorded courses. Go to wzko.in/demo and you will be able to sign up for a free demo class and just join us for one nice evening or morning of quant or verbal discussion. Go to wzko.in/diagnostic, and that's where the diagnostic tests that I mentioned earlier in today's sessions are. So you can absolutely check those out, right? And then you can decide whether you want to take the self-paced course or the live online course and what makes sense for you. Alternatively, I'll ask the team to post our contact number on the chat as well. So just ping us on WhatsApp and the team will reach out to you. Oh, there we go. They have already done that. Okay. So that's my answer to Shubham. Vikram and Dev, I'll answer your questions and then we'll wrap up today's session with that. You need some planning advice. Okay. It looks like you're on track if you have done most of your quant, half of your verbal. I assume you've done your RC because you've said CR and DI remain. So yeah, you can reach out to 95000 as well, ping them on WhatsApp, and then we can figure out how we can connect with you to give you some personalized study plan and guidance, right? If you have 6 semesters and you want to do an MIM, so yes, you should apply in your 5th semester. If you want to join the program right after you graduate, then most of the application deadlines will be end of the 5th semester or early 6th semester, and there are only total of 6 semesters, right? So you need to start thinking about your application if you are in your 5th semester right now, right? End of 5th semester, early 6th semester is the time for you to be submitting your MIM applications. I would answer Jennifer's question as well. I would recommend applying as much as possible in round 2, Jennifer, especially if you're looking at international schools and meeting the January deadlines. And the reason I'm recommending that, there is an additional layer that to your thought process, right? Which is to the whole application process, which is your visa interviews and stuff, right? If you apply in round 3 deadlines will be sometime in, say, March for a bunch of schools. You'll get your results by May first week. Your program will start in August. After you get your results, let's say this is a US school. The document name will vary from school to school. But let's say you're applying to an American school. After you get an admit and you accept the admit, the university will physically send you a form called the I-20, which is a important document that you need to have on hand before you can go even apply for your visa interview, right? So there are several steps involved in the visa process which takes a while, which means you may end up getting an admission in round 3, but then you might struggle to reach the program on time before the start date because the visa interviews might not happen. For that reason, for a lot of schools, I would encourage you to apply to round 2 if you're applying internationally. If it's ISP that you're targeting and you want to catch the Jan round 3 deadline, feel free to do so. Yeah. All right, Dave, you're in your thoughts. Perfect. You have a year to start planning your MIM applications. Don't worry. All right, on that note, let's call this a day. I had a lot of fun chatting with you. Thanks for responding on the chat and asking your questions. I hope you found enough value in attending, sitting through this, listening to an hour of me talking. Absolutely wonderful Diwali, you guys. Have a fantastic celebration this year. And enjoy the World Cup semi-finals and finals as well. I will see you in class in another YouTube video. This was fun. Ciao. Take care.